the more enjoyable something is, the more likely you're going to keep on doing it. So, yes, you could eat like boiled chicken breast and like flaccid steamed vegetables and get really lean really easily, but it would suck and it's not fun.
I was gonna say, life is too short for chicken and broccoli and eggs every day. Welcome to Keep It Simple Sexy, where I make wellness advice, simple. I'm Christine Bullock, fitness trainer, founder of KO Body Care, and mom of 3 little girls. Welcome to my inner circle of elite experts, doctors, and naturopaths who share actionable steps that you can implement immediately into your life to improve your well-being. This is the Keep It Simple Sexy podcast. This episode is brought to you by KO Body Care, the leader in face-grade body care and supplements for total body wellness. Welcome back to Keep It Simple Sexy. I am your host, Christine Bullock. If you had to post a status update on your relationship with food, I think most people would say, it's complicated. I don't know about you, but I know all the right things to eat and I know all the right ways to eat, but I end up making bad decisions driven by stress and being tired and being on the run. How in the world can we reach our summer bod goals, let alone achieve a healthy, lasting relationship with food and therefore our body, when we keep grabbing cookies as soon as our blood sugar drops? That may just be me thing. How do we make real, lasting changes? Well, today we have the food therapist, Shira Barlow, to teach us how to resist the food urges by addressing our emotional issues around food and give us some real talk on how to make sustainable changes when it comes to our relationship with food. Everybody keep listening. You're going to love this episode. Shira Barlow, MS, RD, is a registered dietitian in private practice, a nutrition expert, and the author of The Food Therapist. She's a frequent Goop collaborator and has been featured in magazines such as Glamour, 17, the Oprah Magazine, and Bon Appétit. After completing her master's degree in clinical nutrition at New York University and her dietetic residency at the Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City, Shira started her private practice. She focuses on helping clients untangle their complex relationships with food so they can make more thoughtful choices that serve their ultimate goals while still enjoying delicious food. Yes, I'm all about it. Welcome to the show, Shira.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your background is just, honestly, it's amazing. I love people with really dedicated a period of their life into the study, and I'm sure you still are studying. But that's some major degrees there for nutrition. Yeah. And she's here in LA with us now. We were just kind of like catching up real quick before. So New York to LA, 2 big cities. You've made it through a lot of clients, I'm sure, and this may go everywhere, but with some weird food things, right? You learn with that too.
I think everyone does to a certain extent, don't we?
Yeah. It's always hard to break a habit, to break an unhealthy habit. If it's smoking or something that you completely can give up, great. But food, we have to eat to survive. So I think it's harder to change those kind of habits, right? Even if we know how to eat correctly.
Yes. And I think the other piece of it is that the enjoyment piece, the pleasure piece is also just so important. And so yes, obviously we need to eat to fuel our bodies, but also it's enjoying really delicious food is a really important part of a happy, healthy life too. So I think
Amen.
To have both is really, really important for everything.
Well, let's go backwards a little bit before we jump too far into it. All your amazing tips. How did you get into nutrition and how did you get into helping other people?
Yeah. So I think that, I know that it was really born out of me having a complicated relationship with food. I was a dancer and a figure skater, and I grew up when, everyone's mom was on a diet and it was Atkins and it was fat-free this and sugar-free that. And I
think we live the same life.
Yeah, I think it's really common. And I was hyper aware of just what bodies were in vogue and what everyone was interested in talking about. And it was something that really affected me. And then later on, I didn't know if that was going to be something that I wanted to do and look into as like my career, or it was just going to be kind of an interest. And I wound up going in different directions after college and then coming back to nutrition. Actually, I worked at CAA as an assistant. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but if you saw Entourage, it's one of the big agencies, and I was an assistant. And my boss got pregnant. And the only thing I enjoyed about my job was that I was deciding what she was going to eat. And I would look up everything online to figure out what would be good for her. And I was like, oh no, you can't drink Diet Coke because da 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 da. And I think taking care of her in that way was the thing that I really enjoyed. And I was like, at the time, the agency was representing people who were like experts in different fields. And I was like, I think I could go do that. Why don't I go do that? And so I went back to school and I did that.
That is amazing. And
Yeah.
it's funny because that's kind of how I found my passion too. I was
Mhm.
working plastic surgery here, and I'd always,
Um,
again, been in like fitness and health and stuff like that. But like people were going through gastric bypass. One of the plastic surgeons I worked for, they did a lot of gastric bypass. So I was always like giving the tips afterwards, like, here's what you can eat now, and here's what you can do, and here's what you can do for your skin. But same kind. And I went back and got tons of certifications and studied and all that too. But it is amazing how, it goes to show for anybody out there, like, you pick up those jobs, you go with the flow, but you go with your intuition too, because it really led you to where you are now.
Absolutely. And I think, for anyone that's listening who's of a certain age and kind of like figuring out what they want to do, I think that just as importantly of knowing what you want to do is what you don't want to do. And I think that there can be certain, like, I think it's good to have jobs where you're like, oh, this isn't totally for me, and pick and choose pieces of it and things that you really are inspired by and to go pursue that.
Your book, The Food Therapist, is a food therapy session revealing the root causes of our emotional hangups around food. How and why did your role change from just creating meal plans to actually helping clients cope with the more emotional aspects of nutrition?
So when I went to grad school, and it was very much a clinical program, like I studied organic chemistry and biochem, and I did a residency in each disease state in the hospital, which is really amazing to do, because then any condition that someone has, or any medication someone has, or anything that someone has medically, there are implications in terms of nutrition. You just feel really comfortable and confident in helping people navigate those, knowing those things. But what I will say is that after I graduated from school and I started my private practice, I kind of thought it was going to be more like, here's some information, here's the meal plan, here's everything that we talked about. But what I found was that most people more or less knew what they ought to be doing, and they just weren't doing it. They knew that they should be eating, less emotionally and paying more attention to portion control and like being more thoughtful about the choices that they were making, but they weren't actually doing those things on a day-to-day basis. So there was a gap between their intentions and their day-to-day actions. And the thing was that I think people really feared that they just didn't have willpower, that they just couldn't do it. And they felt like, oh, I'm just not someone that has that ability. But the reality is, what I realized is that it's complicated. People make really hasty decisions because they're stressed and tired and short fused and the whole thing. And so
Mhm.
what I realized was part of it was about understanding what your hangups are and what are the things that are kind of standing in your way, so that you can kind of sidestep them and we can figure out from there.
So, what are the most common hangups that you see?
So there's a lot, and then there's a lot of overlapping. I think the biggest thing is that, like, we're stressed and tired, and for parents especially, like, it's hard to, and I think that we talked about this a little bit, but when we think of willpower,
Mhm.
a lot of people think that that is just a skill that some people have and some people don't. That
Mhm.
some people are just really good about that and some people aren't. But the reality is that willpower is a limited resource. So, and we pull from it from different things. So it's not just, like foregoing the cake in order to have, like an eggs breakfast. It's the idea of, like, we're driving on the street and someone's, like coming into our lane, or, not honking at the person on in the car that's, aggravating us, or not yelling at our kids when they're, being crazy, or, getting our work done and just being like, proper adults about things. All those things, when we're foregoing something that we actually want or in impulse control, we're pulling from that same willpower well. And so I think at the end of the day, after you've like gone to work, taken care of your kids, done the whole thing, it's really, really, really hard to bypass what you really want in that moment, which a lot of times is like, something from the pantry, sugar, what have you. So I think being stressed and tired is a biggie. I also think a lot of people do stuff around indulging. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about indulging, and a lot of people will do these things called like either loopholes or moral licensing. So moral licensing is like, I've been so good, I deserve to be bad. Or like, I cleared my inbox today, I deserve this.
I always hated the word being in fitness too, and like the cheat days,
Yeah.
cheat nutrition. I'm like, why do you have to cheat to do that? Like it's such a bad connotation you're already adding to it,
Well, yeah, I
Just
think
enjoy.
exactly. I think the issue is then you're making it an ethical thing. Like that one behavior kind of is allows you to do this thing. And the thing about it is that indulging has nothing to do with vice or virtue. It's that like if you really want that thing, I think you put it on a plate, you enjoy the shit out of it and then move on. But I think that when we bring in ethics into the conversation, we're getting so far away of what we actually want, what we actually need, that it takes us far away. And then when we indulge under those pretenses, and we get away from like our goals or whatever, we feel like, again, we don't have willpower, when in reality, I think we just got out of the habit of making really conscious indulgences. And I think we do the other thing with the loopholes is people will be like, oh, it's the summer, this doesn't count, or I'm on vacation, this doesn't count.
Mhm.
Type
Oh
of
my God.
thing.
People do that all the time on vacation when it's like they fully indulge in all the buffets and everything like that. And then they have to come back and they're just like, on the hamster wheel trying to clean everything up, trying to lose weight or whatever it is. It's just there has to be like a balance somewhere.
Well, yes, and I think that it really comes down to if those were conscious indulgences. So,
Yeah.
like, with my clients, people can play it however they want. Most people choose not to kind of go like balls to the wall on vacation because it doesn't feel good. It
Yeah,
doesn't
amen to
feel
that.
good.
Yeah, I
It
know.
doesn't feel good. And then when you get back from vacation, like, you don't want to, I mean, it doesn't feel great to then like not fit your clothes and stuff like that. But if someone said to me, I'm going on this vacation. I really don't want to think about it. I want to kind of like go for it. What I would say to them is like, okay, so like, on the other end, we're going to take in some steps back and we'll just get back into it, and God bless, like enjoy, like, let's do it. That's how I would play it. Most
Yeah.
people don't want to do that. And I think most people do somewhere in between where but for me, the thing is like, sit with it and be like, do I really want this thing? And again, if you really want it, you're enjoying the shit out of it. And I think if you come from that place of a conscious indulgence, all those decisions were made thoughtfully. And
Yeah.
that is something that's really important to me. And I think that it helps long term with being able to stick to something that actually really works.
And we're talking about stick, and you mentioned willpower. And
Yes.
so are some of us, so I think about my day and I'm like, wow, think about it. If we just want to like party all day, probably innately, we really do have a lot of willpower throughout the day. So when I eat my kids' pasta, that's really minimal in the whole scheme of things. Or I haven't yelled at them and I'm like, patience, you know,
Yes.
all of that is willpower. And I love that. But are some of us then just doomed? Am I like, I have 3 little ones? Am I so completely burnt out that, like, for instance, for breakfast this morning, I was like, I'm going to have something healthy. I'm going to have a bowl of soup. But my nanny was making pasta. And I'm like, do I just add the pasta into the soup? It'll be so good. It smells so good. But I
Yes.
didn't this morning. So
Well,
I had a
here's the
little willpower.
thing.
But
Here's
there
the
are
thing
days
that
where I don't. Yeah.
you make a really good point, especially with 3 young children at home. Here's how I think about it. So there basically willpower, part of our brain that we really need for willpower is the prefrontal cortex. That is the part of the brain that isn't really even fully developed until we're 25, which is why like people who are in their early 20s make sometimes like really poor decisions that have long-term consequences. But the
Mm.
reality is we need that part of the brain to help us make decisions that are not just good for us in that moment, but are good for us long term. The issue with that is the part of the brain that is most easily distracted. And so one of the things that we really need when we want to engage the prefrontal cortex to help us make these healthy decisions is slowing down. Slowing down and focusing on moment to moment experiences is something that really helps the prefrontal cortex work. And so when we think about slowing down, a lot of people, talk about mindfulness and meditation and stuff like that. And I think it's almost kind of like an eye roll at this moment, because I think we all know that we should be like eating more mindfully and living life more mindfully. But how do you actually do that? And what if you're not actually a meditator?
I love that, Shira. Yes, I agree.
So for me, it's kind of like, making a real effort to pay attention to what you're eating while you're eating. Check in with your body, check in with yourself. How are you feeling? How does your body feel in your chair right now? Are your feet on the ground? Are they crossed? Like getting really grounded. There are ways, like really specific ways that I talk about with clients. But to come back to your question of like 3 little ones at home, are you doomed for willpower? Say you're not a meditator and say you are really trying to check in with yourself. The other thing that I really think about a lot is, the two pieces are you want to ideally engage your prefrontal cortex as much as you can in making these thoughtful decisions. And you also want to do things that will help take the pressure off so you don't actually need willpower. And the way to do that is to make some decisions ahead of time. So whether that's, knowing that like your 3 kids have like all these extracurriculars after school, and like once you get home at like, say after picking everyone up, it's like 6 p.m. At that point, if dinner's not already figured out, like you're going in the pantry and you're eating cereal and you're eating crackers and like eating parts of their dinner that you don't even want. And then by the time it's time for your dinner, it's already kind of like bogus, basically. I'm describing something that I hear about a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for someone like you in that hypothetical situation, something that you could do to take pressure off willpower would be to pre-commit to making a really thoughtful choice. So being like earlier that day, you're slow cooking or whatever, or earlier that day, you're saying, I'm not a huge like meal prepper, but I'm super into meal assembly. So while I'm packing the kids' lunch and my kitchen's already a mess or whatever, I'm like, maybe poaching some chicken and having like a really good sauce on the side, knowing that like while I'm prepping their dinner, whatever, there's like something I could throw together really easy, whether it's like a bowl or a salad or a romaine spear, protein thing. So to me, just to go back to the original question, it's that there are ways to engage the prefrontal cortex, which are ways to like help willpower, help flex that muscle. But then also
like you have to build it.
You have to build it and you have to hone it. But the other thing is like also do yourself a favor and pre-commit to making some thoughtful choices ahead of time so you don't even have to use willpower on those things. So like
that's what I do innately, and I never really thought about that, but we do meal prep at our house, but I basically prep it for the week. And so we always have like, because everybody also in my family likes different things, right? So fortunately and unfortunately, we have the same salmon every single week because my husband likes it. But we have like rice,
people love regularity.
Yeah, chicken. We have some steamed veggies, or I'll add some burgers. You know what I mean? Some red meat in there somehow, or another white fish or whatever. But then we can just kind of like, we're on the run. We all go, we like mix and match with what we have, or like some pasta. Then the kids can add some tuna onto it or whatever. But it does make it so much easier, because I would not survive the craziness if I was eating yuck. And it kind of brings back like the reason I didn't reach for the pasta, which was like, the waft, it was like smelling through the house. I'm like, what is that? That's what got me hungry in the first place to go downstairs. I was like, yeah, I'm going to eat. But is that I was like, I'm not going to feel good if I eat this for breakfast. Right. So you mentioned that too, which is kind of thinking about the big picture, like that frontal cortex really hones in and looking at the big picture. And it's funny because sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, though. Like, for instance, this morning I was like, I have to be able to communicate to people today. So if I'm really tired, I can't. So I will skip that pasta for right now, because it was like, even though it's the future self, it was in the moment still. But back in my fitness days when I was like fitness modeling, we were doing all that, I would eat really clean. I mean, pretty much like I do right now, but real clean. But then I would self-sabotage the night before and get like the most gigantic dairy-filled chocolate chip cookie. And it doesn't put weight on, but it did not make me feel great. And I was bloated the next day and all of that. So like how can we hone that in the sense of thinking about the big picture? Or you talk too about thinking about your future self.
Yeah. Yeah, I talk about future self a lot. These are such thoughtful questions, by the way. I love it. I became obsessed with this idea of future self when I was writing my book. I like poured over the research, and a lot of the research is done by this guy, Hal Hirschfield. And a lot of the research he looked at was on saving behaviors because it's hard to save money. It's hard to save money because you're foregoing something you want right now for something a benefit you can reap in the future. And that's really hard because we want what we want in the moment. And so he looked at a lot of the research, and what he found was that he did a couple studies. The first study revealed that a lot of people, most of the people, had felt like themselves in the future was a completely different person. They had no connection to themselves in the future. And what he realized about that is it's really hard to make a really thoughtful choice in the moment and forego something you want right now for a person that doesn't even feel like you. And later on, what he found in a different set of studies was that he found if people looked at digital renderings of older, like they looked at pictures as if they were looking at older pictures of themselves, that helped them be like, oh, I would save more now for that person. And what he found was that a lot of people have like zero connection to that future self. But if we have that connection with our future self, that helps fuel these really thoughtful choices. And the way I think about it in terms of goals is we all have goals. I think no matter who you are and what you want to do, most people want to look and feel their best 3 months, 6 months, a year from now. But we also have these right now wants. You want pasta because you smelled it in your kitchen. You walk by, you're at the airport or a mall or whatever, and you smell like those pretzels or, the cinnamon buns or whatever. I was just thinking about a mall yesterday. So that's what that was. So like we want these things in the moment. And the way I think about it, it isn't always foregoing that right now want for that long-term goal. However, it is having to be really thoughtful about if you really want that thing and if it's worth it to you. And if it is, again, putting it on a plate, enjoying it slowly, savoring it. But in terms of that future self, I think really connecting to yourself in the future can really do that. So being like, even your next day self. And so that goes back to you during your fitness modeling days. I think probably a lot of other things were going on. I think that culture can kind of, you may have been going so under that then you kind of felt a little like you kind of needed it.
I actually like it. Just
Tell me.
You really like opened something up for me because I think people are always like, oh my God, you have so much willpower. And I eat very balanced, like a fried chicken, French fries. Like I'm a full balance kind of gal, like you're saying, but I don't put the pressure on myself but now I get it because I'm always thinking of my health later.
Yeah.
I'm like, how is this? And not the next day too,
Yeah.
usually. It is like literally my long-term health. That's what my passion's always been. But in the sense of the fitness, I could give a crap what I look like.
Right.
So I feel like that's why, because I was like, it's too much pressure and the thing that I don't care about. And I think what you're saying too, we don't reach those long-term goals when something is just so immediate. It wasn't really my future self. It was like myself then, right?
Right.
Instead of really seeing the big picture, like you're saying, that real future self of like, how do you want to feel?
How do you want to
right?
feel?
That way is like then what you're going to look like too when you're older. Because if you're feeling tired and crappy and bloated and all of that, I imagine like your hair is going to be falling out, your skin's going to be wrinkling, you're going to have gained weight or lost too much weight. You know what I mean? All of that, we all go through those kind of things. And
I mean, we're all aging no matter how we play it. But yes, there is so like that's true, A. But yes, exactly what you're saying. I think that the reality is like making these thoughtful choices, doing it in a way that feels really good is going to benefit yourself later on. I don't think that we always have to choose that long-term goal over the right now on. And I actually don't think that's healthy either. But I think having that ability to access that as a way to think about what you want is so, so healthy. And it really works out.
it's healthier mentally too,
Yeah.
because there's too much pressure in just saying no or not enjoying or trying to enjoy it or this or that, or just focusing on like a simple image of the now too.
Yeah.
It is just a lighter, softer choice. Too, I was thinking of my husband as well. Like his favorite food is actually soft pretzels.
Oh,
And he's like a meat and potato kind of guy, whiskey all the time. But only recently in the past year, I think he's been making so many more healthy choices. And I was never one to pressure. I never said a darn thing. I'm like, you either eat it or you don't, or you go get your own food, right? You know,
wow. Okay. Yeah.
I'm not cooking something separate. But now he's just starting to make those healthy choices. And the reason is we have 3 little girls. Our friends are getting sick with major diseases, and he's thinking about his future self. That
Yeah.
is the only thing that has made that change. And it's a dramatic change.
Wow. That's
Mhm.
amazing. And I think a lot of people, ideally, I think you can access it for yourself. But I will say, and I'm glad you mentioned that a lot of people, if they can't for themselves, can for their kids.
Yeah.
And not just that, and being healthy for, the long term, so you can be there around for all those like important milestones in their lives and stuff, but also like our kids are watching. And not to say that in a way like, to freak you out so that we're worried about what we're doing, but in a way of like modeling this behavior for our kids, that like we indulge in this conscious way that feels really good and is really thoughtful, but we're like treating our bodies with respect. And I think that that's a really beautiful thing that you can trickle down and teach your kids.
And even if it's almost like a fake it till you make it. Even if
Yeah.
you're faking it a little bit at first, I think by saying those things or doing those things, then
Yeah.
it's going to become part of your cellular science too. Like for my girl, same way. I was a ballerina. My mom had everything low fat, low
Yeah.
sugar. Like I went through the same thing, right? She had tried all the different diets out there too. I mean, I was like raised on the blood type diet. We were pescatarian when I was a teenager, and one year for Thanksgiving we only had fish. Like I've, experienced it
Yeah.
all. So I make sure with my daughters, one, in the sense of being in fitness, I've never said I feel this, I feel
I love
whatever,
that.
right? I
Yeah.
don't feel good, I feel sick. And we also talk about food in a way like protein is going to bring you long-term energy.
Yeah.
The veggies are going to help to, do this, or your fruits are for your skin. And, we make it really basic so they start to learn the concept of what they want on their plate. But I
Right.
just, like I said, we indulge like fried chicken sandwich or whatever, French fries, burgers
Yeah.
on the weekends and stuff. But I'm not like, oh, I can't eat that. Oh,
Right.
you have to really watch. And I enjoy it, like you're saying, because on one side, I love what my mom did. She was very healthy, I will say, on one side, right? But we didn't have we didn't have any unhealthy stuff in there.
Oh,
So I want
yeah,
to
yeah.
make sure I teach them both sides, because then when I was 20 or at my friend's house, I was like, nachos in your pantry? I'm going to eat that whole
Yeah.
bag and the Oreos
Yeah.
and whatever else. And I had to relearn how to have willpower,
Well,
basically.
you bring up a lot of really important points in that. And I think it kind of also goes back to now something that I think is super topical and is all over TikTok now and whatever, which is like the whole almond mom culture.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, I don't know how familiar you are with it, but
I'm
it's
not. I'd love to hear about
oh,
it.
oh, oh, oh. By the way, almond mom as like a trending topic on TikTok is like has like billions of, I mean, not like
What
misspoken.
is it? Is it like making fun of almond mom,
Almond
or is
mom
it like
is making an
proud?
almond mom, it came out of, and this is no disrespect to her, and I don't know these people and it's fine, but There was this clip of Yolanda Hadid and
Oh, yeah.
Gigi, and Gigi was like, "Oh, I
Oh, I
feel
remember this.
I feel sick," or something like that, and she was like, "Have
She
3 almonds and
Yeah.
chew them really well, like, chew them really slowly."
I
And it
felt bad. There was
kind of
probably something for her digestion that was like,
right. We all maybe, like, went
yeah.
too hard on Yolanda for that, but then it kind of, again, kind of what you and I were talking about, like, culture and when we were growing up where it's like moms who literally really value thinness and diet culture and we're very much like, oh, she's thin, she's not, and we're talking about bodies and her own body and always on a diet and the fat free this and the sugar free that and all of that. And I think that was very common when you and I were coming up as kids, and it's something that's now in the culture again. And I've talked about this a lot on my podcast now, which is that, I have a lot of empathy for those moms because a lot of those moms grew up with moms who then also had an unhealthy relationship with food. And it kind of like really trickles down and kind of like generational trauma until one person is like, hold on, let me like really look at this and let me try and figure out when I'm actually hungry and when I'm actually full and what really matters to me and how I can like honor my body and also like meet my goals. I think for women, we sometimes, especially with media stuff, and when we're talking about this, it's kind of like damned if we do, damned if we don't. Because it's like, if we're like too into looking a certain way, then we're one thing. But then if we're not taking care of ourselves, it's another thing. So I think it's totally fine and healthy to like want to look and feel your best. But at the same time, being mindful of the way we think about this and the way we talk about this, especially around our daughters and our sons too. But just being thoughtful about how all of this is affecting us and affecting our families, I think is all we can really ask for.
Yeah, and it is. I mean, it's really taking a look at again, it's doing it for somebody else. So taking it out of that immediate action, even though maybe it's your future self because it is your children, right?
Yeah,
So it's another concept of what your future self is
of course. Yeah,
for generations to
absolutely.
come. The Keep It Simple Sexy podcast is brought to you by KO Body Care. Do you feel like it's busy season all the time? Stress affects our bodies more than we realize. High cortisol levels can lead to fatigue, weight gain, hair loss, fertility issues, and more. Combat those negative effects and really feel a difference with KO stress support supplements. These all-natural capsules contain a powerful blend of adaptogenic herbs that help your body to adapt to stress and reduce cortisol levels, the hormone responsible for stress. With daily use, you'll start to notice a decrease in stress and anxiety, improved moods, and better sleep. Say goodbye to the endless cycle of stress and anxiety and hello to a true relaxation and peace of mind. Order now and receive a 20% discount using code KISS20. That's code KISS20 at kobodycare.com. Stress support adaptogen capsules are my not so secret way to handle it all. There's a little thing that you say too, though, about brides, how brides are really good at this. Why is it that brides are so I was too. I
Oh, yeah.
really
Well,
just
oh my
stick
God.
with
In
something.
my practice for, gosh, however many years
Little dog,
now,
sorry.
the brides are in it to win it. And it's really obvious to me why. And it's because they can imagine with really great specificity how they want to not just look, but how they want to feel on that day in that dress, in those pictures, walking down the aisle, the whole thing. I think that in what we were saying before, when people don't have that connection to their future self, a specific day and a specific look and a specific aesthetic that people have, they're really tuned into how they want to look and feel on that day. And because of that, and they're so, so, so tuned into it, they end up being just like so dialed in. The brides always are in it to win it. And, the thing about it, and I've talked about this too recently, I think there's a whole like shedding for the wedding culture that is so, like not so healthy. And people feel like they have to then like look completely different than they do normally and drop like a million dress sizes and all of that. And I don't think that culture is healthy. But then I also, of course, do understand wanting to look and feel your personal best, whatever that is for you on that day in a way that you've done healthfully.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the brides kill it because they can really connect to that future self and how they want to feel.
I can absolutely see that. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's probably why summer bod kind of stuff also, because you're like, I'm going to go on this one vacation. It
Yeah.
means this much to me. And then the willpower trickles the rest of the summer once you've hit that vacation, you know?
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
really,
It's
go ahead. Mhm.
having a specific thing like that often really kicks people into high gear, not like even just for because they can really imagine, then they're like picking out their bathing suits and they're picking out their things and the things that they're going to do there, and they can connect. Then all of a sudden the summer doesn't feel that far away, or all of a
Mhm.
sudden the fall doesn't feel that far away because they have this really specific goal.
So basically, you know, I think our viewers really do know a lot of the right choices, like you're saying.
Yeah.
But we need to think of our future self, work on our willpower, work on strengthening our willpower through thinking of our future self. And hopefully, whether it's, in the bride stuff, thinking physically, but I think if we can think really of our long-term health and really this much, much bigger picture, these these changes, these lasting changes, and will occur in the emotional aspect of what we're reaching for. And kind of like wrapping that a little bit. So as we're working on that, and to continue to come back, that I know you have some self-regulation techniques as
Yes.
we just begin that process, which I
Yeah.
think is great. Like these are the steps that you start with as you're trying to work on changing an emotional aspect, which is huge.
All of it works together. So,
Mhm.
and by the way, again, these questions are so thoughtful, and they really follow in a lot of ways the book, and you like clearly did so much research, which I think is so special and lovely. But I think thinking about all of this, so like for me, there's different pillars. One piece which we talked about is the self-knowledge piece. Knowing what makes you tick, knowing what your triggers are, knowing what those roadblocks are for you that tend to trip you up, whether that's that you're someone who has kids and at the end of the day you're just totally trashed, and after you put them to sleep you're going straight to the pantry. So knowing building in basically the thinking about those thoughtful decisions ahead of time.
Mhm.
What can you do ahead of time to like have maybe some like special like protein, veggies, dips, whatever things that you actually really want in your fridge front and center at eye line. So it's right there when you want it. So you're kind of pre-committing to making thoughtful choices. Of course, like assuming that you've already had dinner and you're full and satisfied and all of that. So
Mhm.
that's one. And then the other piece is again taking pressure off yourself. Well, I guess I just said that. But the other piece, which I think that now you're coming back to, is this idea of if the prefrontal cortex is the part of the brain that is really important for making those thoughtful decisions, how do we hone that? Because even if you're someone who hasn't typically felt really strong in that area, we can absolutely do more things to help engage that. And again, stress is something that, and distractions make it really hard. And how could we not be so distracted? We have like literally I turned my notifications off for this podcast, but like if I didn't, there would be like ding, 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 ding.
I'll tell you.
So I talk about some really simple things that you can do. One of them that sounds kind of kooky is eating with your non-dominant hand. So something that happens a lot is kind of like this cruise control eating where you're
Mhm.
kind of just like not really paying attention. It's kind of like when you're driving and you're kind of driving for long periods, and all of a sudden if that like do you need coffee light pops on, you're like whoop, you all of a sudden are now like engaged. And so I think a lot of times when we're eating and we're distracted in the whole thing, we can kind of be cruise control. But
Mm.
to eat with your non-dominant hand, you have to like think a little harder and pay more attention, and paying attention to what you're eating while you're eating it is really important for the prefrontal cortex. So eating with your non-dominant hand is
That
great.
it breaks the pattern right away. I
Yes.
mean, that's what's so amazing. If you can think to do that, then it's gonna break that, like, trend of your brain just not focusing right away. It
Yes.
pops you out of it.
And like, it's not appropriate for everything. And like you kind of maybe it feels a little jerky. You can do it in the comforts of your own home, maybe, but it's something that helps engage.
Mhm.
I do, and I go back to it a lot of putting your food on a plate. I think it's really easy to like eat hurriedly over the sink or the counter and take kind of little like sneaky bites. And I say sneaky not because it's like something naughty or bad, but just because like I think people think like, oh, this doesn't count because it's like a lot of people do it for Thanksgiving. They'll like take these like sneaky bites. I'm like, put whatever that was, it added up to like a sliver at least of pie. So like put it on a plate,
Yeah.
really enjoy it.
It's like you go back. I do that, or I used to a lot, where you just kind of go into the refrigerator, you eat a piece of the brownie or whatever it is, you close the refrigerator. You literally, by the time you're finished chewing, walk right back over, open it back up, do it again, maybe 3-4 times, and you've eaten the whole thing. Like,
Yeah.
just put it
Yeah.
on to see what you're going to do and enjoy it, like you're saying.
Exactly. I think that that's a biggie. And then another thing that I'm really into, again, it's not like for every situation, but I do think like eating with your hands and getting into like the more sensual aspect of eat. I think sometimes, like, and feel like really paying attention to the textures and the flavors. And with that also, I think that there's like this thing that can happen in terms of eating where you're like full, not satisfied. And you're just kind of like, in a food rut or whatever. So like if you can, some type of mixed media. So like if you're having like, I don't know why this image pops in my mind, but say you're having like a chocolate avocado mousse, like something that's really, or like a yogurt or something that's really smooth, like adding something, whether it's like with a little crisp or a little nut or a little crunch, something so that there's a little bit of mixed media, it helps engage our senses and really like pay attention to those flavor notes and what's going on. Like the more we pay attention to what we're eating while we're eating it, the more we're going to engage that PFC, that prefrontal cortex. And, paying attention to flavor, playing around with spices. I think a lot of times when they get really busy, we start making kind of just like random bland blah food. And, like I cook with like a ton of paprika and cumin and chili, it depends on like what your personal flavor profile is, but pay attention to spice, pay attention to mixed media, eat with your hands, pay attention to what you're eating while you're eating it, eat with your non-dominant hand, slow it down. All of those things will help.
These are such great tips because I think, that last thing too, when you don't have the savory thing, you might be eating super healthy, but you just keep reaching for something because you're like, something is not satisfied. I love that last tip as well. And, going back to the frontal cortex and willpower, I hear it in fitness all the time. I mean, I get asked the question all the time, how do you motivate yourself to do it? And it's never been about motivating. It's just kind of like a pattern in my life that just fits and I like it. And I think that even through this, when you keep coming back to being present, right? The left hand, the putting different textures is making you more present when you're eating it. And I think this is a really great way because we eat 3 meals a day, right? And so, or snack or whatever, these are moments in your day where you're really practicing thoughtfulness, but you're giving us this like physical way to start to do it. Right. And then hopefully that can translate into other parts of our life too, because we're building that muscle in the front of our brain.
Absolutely. And you brought up something really important when you were just kind of breaking that whole thing down, which is that, and this I think is the really important piece, and this is why it works, and this is why I see results with clients, which is that the more enjoyable something is, the more likely you're going to keep on doing it. So, yes, you could eat like boiled chicken breast and like flaccid steamed vegetables and get really lean really easily, but it would suck and it's not fun. And because of that, people do that all the time, especially in your former,
Yes, all the weightlifters. I always say life is too short for chicken and broccoli and eggs every day.
It is. And the thing is you can do it and that will work, but that feels awful. And because of that, it's not sustainable. And that's when people do go so far on the other end where they're like black and white, that wasn't worth it, blah, blah, blah. So I think if you can find a rhythm, and I see this in my clients all the time where it's like this thing that we're doing actually feels really good. And because of that, it fuels you forward. And then you start making even more thoughtful choices for yourself and seeing those results and getting it. And when you get in that groove, it just feels so good. And I think, in the past, when we would talk about food and nutrition and eating, it was all like, in terms of the goals and in terms of just like the nutrient piece. And I think enjoying good food is such an important part of life and health. And so I think if we can make it taste really good and we can make it feel really good, we'll keep on doing it again and again and again.
These tips are going to honestly change so many people's patterns and relationships with food, with our friend food. I mean, it is one of our closest friends because
Oh
we have to
yeah, for
eat
sure.
all the time.
Yeah.
Shira, thank you so much. Everybody got to read her book, The Food Therapist.
Mhm.
She's like the food therapist. I feel like I went through a personal therapy session today, and I'm sure you guys did too. She also has a podcast, Good Instincts. What kind of stuff do you talk about on your podcast?
I talk about this stuff. It's fun because it's actually a daily. So it's like
Mhm. Yeah.
they're all like around 5 minutes.
Mhm.
And it's a lot of it is this. We talk about some like current topics, but I do go by what people are really into, what I'm talking about with my clients. And a lot of it is this kind of like getting out of our own way. I think so many of us fear that if we're not really hard on ourselves and we don't make it, like so militant, that we'll kind of like stay in one place and stay complacent. But it's actually quite the opposite, that like when we show ourselves self-compassion, when we are really kind to ourselves, it helps us be able to like clear the way to figure out how to actually get there and close that gap between the intention and action.
And it's through those little actions, like you're saying, once you close that, once you take those physical steps towards it,
Yeah.
then all of the other energy starts to change, I think, in your life
Mhm.
too, right? And it's
Yeah.
just this awesome, like healthy hurricane, tornado. I want to maybe a nicer thing, but just energy flow towards the good stuff instead of the bad stuff. I know I can say
Absolutely.
that personally in my life for sure. And there's been the ups and the downs of all of it.
And the
So,
thing is, it's also important, don't you think? Like,
mhm,
I think that when you look back, being able to be like, oof, that didn't feel great and that wasn't great. But what was going on in my life at that time that was like making it really hard to make thoughtful choices and make decisions that would actually be really healthy for me, and take a look at those in a really just kind of like curious way versus like a punishing way, I
I
think
love
is so big. And just kind of like, I really do think that in the past we worried about being too kind to ourselves. But the thing about it is that when we come from that place, we can actually, we're never going to not have those roadblocks. It's not like once you figure this out, it's just kind of like smooth sailing from then ahead. But it's
mhm.
that, once you learn what those are, you can learn how to live with them and what makes you tick. And then they don't, and then maybe you do take a step back every once in a while, and then you just get right back up and you keep on going.
Right. Life is gonna hit you, and you're gonna have,
Absolutely.
like, the ups and downs, and I was just talking about that on social media in the sense of building a business, like, there are ups and downs every single day with having a business, like, but you can't be fearful of those, but you can be very aware, of the road and the choices that you're doing throughout the day that are gonna support your needs in those stressful times and keep you on the right path. And
Completely.
I believe nutrition is huge. And not just like we've been talking about making the healthy choices, but that nutrition then leads to your energy, your mind. It creates all your cells. It creates your cellular network. So it is really important to start being aware of this and changing these habits. And I think that this is the base of so many people's, I don't want to call them issues, but challenges with, hitting the right spot and finding that like really easy road to healthy nutrition.
Well, it goes back to our relationship with ourselves. It's,
Mhm.
being kind to ourselves, understanding ourselves, doing our very best, looking at it from all angles. And when we do take those inevitable steps back, picking right back up. I think a lot of people, what happens is like when they take those steps back, it's like, oh, it's all ruined. I may as well go completely whatever.
Mhm.
Versus like if like a 1 day or 2 day or 3 day kind of weird bender, weird set of
Yeah.
circumstances ended there, then it's just a weird couple days. But then, like for a lot of people, they punish
Yeah.
themselves for weeks, and then it lasts longer. And it's like talking to yourself like you would your best friend, which would be great.
Yeah. Yes, because you truly are, right? You
Like,
should be
honey,
your
and be
best
like,
bud.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry that happened. That sounds like it didn't feel great. Let's get right up.
Yeah.
Like, there's no point. There's no point, and like, don't punish yourself now. It doesn't help. But I think that that is kind of the old school way of doing things. And I think the new school way of doing things is just, I think, being a lot more thoughtful and a lot more self-compassionate. And I'm really into that.
Amazing. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. I know why you're called the food therapist. Everybody go out, grab the book, tune into her Daily Good Instincts, which I love. I'm going to start tuning into that too, because I think that's a nice little uplifting thing. And it's like a reminder through your day too. And you can find her on Instagram at Shira, SHIRA_RD. And then her website is shirard.com. It's all in our feed. Are you on TikTok too?
Yeah, I'm gonna figure out. I'm a big consumer of TikTok. I am on TikTok. Follow me on TikTok. Maybe it will inspire me to get
I know. I'm starting to love TikTok more and more and more. But thank you so much, Shira. And I look forward to all the new stuff that you'll be coming out with too. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a great day. Thanks for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and feel free to share this with a friend who needs to hear it. Have questions you need answered? Text me at 1-310-361-8697. Make sure you follow me on social at Christine Bullock, and have a healthy, happy week. See you next time.